what is really good about this Art Basel online? Let's be positive, right?
Sure. So the online viewing rooms, obviously this is our second edition. The first one was for Hong Kong. And the galleries have learned a lot in the intervening 3 months. You see that many of them have really thought about how to present themselves, how to present their programs better online than they had before. I mean, a lot of people learned, I think a lot of people will do things, they won't just put 15 works online. They're going to rotate the collections, they're promoting them heavily. At least 3 dozen of them are going to do virtual events during the show. Everything from studio tours to streaming documentaries about the artists that they're showing. There's a performance by David de Melis, organized by Jan Mott, which will be a recasting of a work that he had done in the 1970s. In addition to which, because a lot of people had commissioned or had gathered great work for the Basel show that we were hoping to do in September, now that it's been canceled, that work is coming in. And so we're going to see a value of artwork that's 2.5 to 3 times as high as it was in Hong Kong. And of course, that's only one measure of quality, but it does indicate that at the high end, people
How can you judge that?
What's that?
About the quality. How can you judge it?
Well, I was talking about the prices.
Okay, prices.
I was saying the prices are 2.5 to 3 times. The total value of the works in the online viewing room is 2.5 to 3 times as high as it was in Hong Kong. That's only one measure of quality, but certainly it indicates that people feel like it's worthwhile to bring expensive works into this environment, even though it's a digital environment. The other thing that's really interesting is that where possible, galleries are hanging the works in their gallery in where they are. So, for example, there are 30 galleries in Berlin that are doing it, but also I know the galleries in London and Paris are doing it as well. So the idea is, I think, a kind of hybrid model where the people who can't see it in person will see it online, and the people who are in the city where the gallery has a space can come and see it in person. And I think just in general, people have learned, for example, I remember a gallerist telling me that video is really important, and mostly she was selling works using videos of the work, or videos of the artist talking about the work, or some combination. And so now every single work that's in the online viewing room has the possibility to have the video attached to it. And for example, I was just looking yesterday at a video that Chantal Cluzel had attached to a He Guiyang sculpture. So instead of just being a picture of the sculpture, you can actually see the sculpture in motion from different sides as well. So that really gives an extra value, I think, in the same way, even for a painting, which is two-dimensional. Often it's hard to tell if you just see a square, what's the surface look like. But if you have a video that pans across the surface of the painting, then it's a much more powerful kind of experience, even if it's digital.
Yeah. So do you think that it really works to show and to propose expensive works online?
I mean, I think so. I mean, people have been doing this for 3 or 4 months, and obviously they're doing it based upon their own experience. There have been some very expensive works that were sold that were reported to have been sold online,
but not so many. I mean, Zwirner sold some, but there's not so many sold online, I think. Don't you think?
I mean, I will say this. People have been selling works well over $1 million for the last 3 months, and it wasn't in person. So clearly, I think putting it in front of your collectors is a good idea,
To try.
What's that?
To try, at least.
But it also works. I mean, why would you not do it?
Because if you 1 million, 2 million, 3 million is real money. So you need to feel the work, and you know very well yourself that it's not the same feeling about seeing a work online and seeing it in real.
Yes, but I wouldn't discount the possibility that people can buy a work by an artist who they know from a gallerist who they know and trust, having not seen the work, with the feeling that if there's some issue with it for whatever reason, they can always go back to the gallerist. I don't think people are going to buy a very expensive work by an artist whose work they've never seen from a gallerist they don't know.
So it's all.
It doesn't mean that you can't sell expensive work right now. People are doing it all the time.
Yeah, but
and that's the notion that the market is dead is completely wrong. It's definitely constrained. It's definitely slowed down and contracted. But people have been selling art, via Zoom, via FaceTime, via WhatsApp and Instagram and video. So it's, and I think it's a time of experimentation. And obviously everybody can't wait for the day when collectors are traveling internationally, when we're doing fairs, when there are biennials and museum shows. There's no question that that's incredibly important, but there's also no question that people are not just sitting back and waiting for that moment to come. I think, and what's great about this is that, you have, people are developing all of these skills. They're developing this whole skill set of how to promote their artists, how to work with collectors. And if you talk to collectors who live in faraway places, not the collectors who necessarily live in Paris or London or New York, the art world centers, but if you talk to people who live more at the periphery in places like Indonesia or Mexico, for them, there's a much greater quality of content, a much greater quality of access than there was before. And I like to think that galleries will continue to do that, realizing that it's important not only to sell to the people who are standing in front of you and who can easily stand in front of you, but also to the people all over the world.
So how do you imagine the art market in the future?
I think it's going to be hybrid. So I think there will still be an incredible importance to meeting in the galleries, at the fairs, at biennials, at museum shows, because I think that fundamentally it's a market based on trust and based on emotion. And it's very hard to fall in love with the work of an artist without ever seeing it in person.
Yeah.
Once you have, if you know roughly what the work looks like and you just know, okay, well, this is what the image is and this is the size of it, then people can buy. But the first thing of falling in love, I think, is very hard to do in the digital. So I think, on the one hand, the physical interactions, the physical viewing of work will remain incredibly important. On the other hand, I think that in the time between when we're together, that galleries will have a whole repertoire of skills that they didn't have before. They'll have learned how to promote their type of artist, their type of collector using the digital.
But do you think there will be as many fairs as we know today?
We were already seeing a consolidation of the market. For the last few years, the indication from the UBS Basel Art Market Report that we do every year was that galleries were making more of their money at fairs, but doing fewer fairs or trying to do fewer fairs. I think a lot of it depends on the overall health of the gallery system, and a lot of that depends on how good the individual countries are in supporting the small and medium businesses that the galleries are. So I think, I do think that there will be a need for major fairs. The question is whether there will be a need for so many of them. Let's say so many fairs. I think the major fairs will always have their place.
And we have read everywhere that there will be less and less galleries too. What's your feeling?
I have to say I've been through a couple, first as a journalist and then as a fair director, I've been through a couple of very tough economic periods, and it was always surprising how few galleries closed in comparison to what the predictions were. I think galleries are relatively small businesses, and they're businesses that can rein in a lot of their costs pretty quickly. And often people are gallerists because they feel they can't imagine themselves doing anything else. So it's not a profession that they abandon easily. The gallerists are by nature, they're fighters, they're entrepreneurs.
And what? Sorry.
Go ahead.
And what about the prices? because we could see that some very young artists were sold for very high prices. So what's your feeling about that?
I mean, it's an answer I've given before, but I think it still holds true. It's every artist has their own market. I do think if there were artists who were being bought heavily because people expected to be able to sell them within 6 to 12 months, that's going to slow down, because obviously in this kind of market, I think that highly speculative type of buying isn't happening. I don't think, based on who I've been talking to, but again, that's not really my part of the market, But if you talk to people who part of the market it is, if you talk to consultants or gallerists, what they say is what's changed right now is not that the prices are dropping dramatically, but because a lot of collectors are very busy with personal issues or with their own businesses, collectors are getting access to work that they might not have gotten before. The access is better. The prices aren't better, but the access is better. And I would say the word of caution I would give to collectors who feel like this is a buyer's market, the galleries are desperate and they need liquidity, is that when a gallerist needs liquidity, they don't start by selling their best work. They sell from the bottom of the deck, not from the top of the deck. And so, yes, you can probably get some C-level works for C-level prices. And maybe in the past, the gallerists might have tried a B-, but you're not going to get an A-level work for B prices.
But some galleries do need money now, so they could.
Yeah, but of course. But if all you need is money, then you sell the work that's less important to you.
But it doesn't make much money.
Well, you can sell a lot of it.
If you have.
I think people would rather sell 10 works they don't like so much than one work that they love.
So you believe there will not be a major collapse for young, trendy artists, for example?
That's not what I'm saying, because that's exactly the type of artist I was talking about in the beginning. I think it's the difficulty for the problem for young artists is the same as the problem for newly opened restaurants or newly opened boutiques or something, is that there's this kind of momentum building that happens with a young artist's career. Like, people notice them, and then they get a couple great gallery shows, and they get some museum shows, they get some biennial shows, and then they move to another gallery, and like all of that is stalled right now. And so what could happen for some of these artists is that the momentum sort of slows down, and then when things get rolling again, there's another generation of hot young artists.
Which means
that it will be a very competitive environment.
So it could mean the prices going lower for the young artists, even if they are excellent.
Yeah, but that's not a new phenomenon. In December, you could have pointed me to a ton of artists whose markets had collapsed since January.
Yeah, but it's good to speak about it.
That not all hot artists become established artists. It's the nature of the game, that there's a period where a lot of artists are on the radar from their generation, and then over time there are fewer.
No, but we know that the middle prices for young artists in big galleries were extremely high, and it was not normal. It was not accurate, because we didn't know what they could become, what they could create, and the prices were huge, just because they were shown by multinational.
Judith, that's been the case for the last 15 years. I was writing this story when I was still a journalist, and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, because something happened, it could change. Don't you think?
I don't think the dynamic of the art world will change in the long run. I think, to use Charles Saatchi's famous phrase, collectors are neophiliacs. They always love new things, and so I think there will always be an interest in artists who were unknown a few years before, because there's a part of the market that loves to prove that they have a better eye, a faster eye. And there's a part of the market that loves, even if they're not going to resell, they love the idea that they're buying the work that all their friends are going to want, but first and less expensively. The other interesting thing on this front, and this is actually something that I learned in the process of both preparing the Zoom panel that we did last week with Kamel Manour and Ashley Carr and Arv Herman, but also in the process of writing an article that I published over the weekend in the FT, which was that my assumption going into that was that basically the only phenomenon was what I talked about before, which is people buying artists who they know from gallerists who they know, and people selling to collectors who they know. And what emerged in the process of preparing for this panel and for this article was that a lot of collectors now, because they have time, are actually going to look, for example, through all of our online viewing room next week. They won't do it in one sitting. They'll do it in 2 or 3 days. And they'll come out of that with a whole new set of names of galleries and artists who are of interest to them. And they won't probably go and buy the work right away unless it's really inexpensive, unless it's really, like, for them, an impulse purchase. And obviously my impulse purchase and your impulse purchase, might be, whatever, a pair of socks or like a bottle of wine. And for someone, it might be $50,000 painting, But the point is that I think outside of the kind of purely impulse purchase buying, there's going to be, coming out of this period, when we come back into this more active, more mobile, art world, there's going to be a pipeline of galleries and artists that collectors have become aware of in this time when there was more time to do research. And so I think from that standpoint, not only will some of the artists who are just starting to be discovered, who are hot but not omnipresent, not only will some of those have some attention that they didn't have before, but also a whole other group of artists will come onto the radar.
Okay.
So it's an admittedly borderline utopian vision, but I do think that this is not only a period where there's going to be you can't say that this is going to be a period where there's going to be an unquestionable consolidation, the rich getting richer, the scissor effect. I do think this is a time when the galleries at every level who learn how to play this digital game can succeed.
And do you have an idea about the middle range of prices at the fair this year?
I don't. I'm not sure. There are works of at least close to 10 million down to less than 10,000. And I think it's pretty evenly spread, because the Art Basel show has 282 galleries. And so, of course, some of those are, the young galleries that very few people have heard of, and then some of them are the big brand international names. And so obviously I think...
And you ask the gallery to put prices, right?
It's not just ask, it's require.
So for example, if you need to request a price, you are not happy?
You can't request the price. It's not an option. There's no price on demand.
Wow, that's cool.
And we started this from Hong Kong. It's only price or price range.
Very nice. Super. That's a really new thing on the market.
What's that?
That's a really new thing about the market, to know the prices.
Yeah, other platforms that no other platform that I know has been as strict, but we really thought it was important. We studied some research. We talked to collectors. Their Artsy had done an analysis of their own platform's data, which indicated that works which had a price attached to them were, I think, 7 times as likely to be bought as works which didn't.
Wow.
And I think collectors like to have a sense, because every collector, no matter how wealthy they are, has a budget and is going to compare the prices of artists they know versus artists they don't know. And I think for the galleries as well, it's a little bit of what the Germans say, it's jumping over their own shadow, you know. But on the other hand, I think what it means is that presumably most people who ask about a work can afford it. But and it's what's interesting about it is it's price. This kind of price, it's not quite transparency because it's not exact. You know, you can do a price range, but this pricing information has two effects, or at least two effects I can think of. One effect is that when you know what the price is, you know whether this person is out of your price range. You know, you might say, well, I like it, but I can't afford $2 million for it. But one of the things that Ashley Carr, the advisor who was on the panel last week, was talking to me about is the fact that actually, as you and I both know, historical artists are often radically underpriced in comparison with the rest of the market. That you have major historical artists, you know, and you think, you know, oh my God, how is it possible that, you know, and I remember many years ago, and it's probably not the case anymore, but looking at the price for Beuys, you know, Joseph Beuys, who's, you know, one of the major European figures, you know, of the 20th century, and just realizing that in comparison with some of the young painters, you know, you could get a major work for relatively little money. And I think, I mean, much more money than I have, you know, but I mean, the point is that I think for a collector to say, I think there's an assumption that things were out of their price range, and actually realizing that, in fact, it's not the case, that there are major, especially, let's be honest, especially artists of color, especially female artists, you know, who are older, which means that they're not in a market like we have today, which prizes a diversity, you know, and which rewards diversity. I think, you know, if you were a Black woman painter in the 60s and 70s,
but it's changing now.
Someone like Howardina Pindell, or someone like Carmen Herrera or Atal Adnan, you know, I think now their prices are more reflective of what they should be vis-a-vis their male peers. But they're still low, and they're probably much lower than people would expect. You know, I think the expectation is when you see that an artist is having shows all over the place and is being mentioned constantly in the press, you assume that that artist has very high prices. And in fact, collectors might be pleasantly surprised by the price that they see in our online viewing rooms.
Bon, merci monsieur.
De rien, madame. Bonne journée.
J'espère à bientôt. Thank you. Bye.